Jake Morrison sat in the cold metal chair and watched the alien beings argue about humans like they were not even in the room. The Galactic Council chamber stretched high above him with walls that glowed soft blue light. Hundreds of different alien species filled the curved seats that went up like a giant bowl. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 5 years now, and every single time felt the same. The aliens talked down to humans like they were children who did not know anything about space travel or politics or how to run a civilization. Lisa Carter sat next to Jake and took notes on her tablet. She was his deputy and had been working with the council for 3 years. Lisa tried to stay calm, but Jake could see her jaw getting tight when the Zalari representative started talking. The Zalari looked like tall gray birds with 4 arms and bright yellow eyes that never seemed to blink. Their representative stood up and made clicking sounds that the translation device turned into words. "The human proposal for new trade routes is foolish and dangerous," the Zalari said. "These primitive beings do not understand the complexity of galactic commerce. They want to fly their crude ships through space that belongs to civilized species." Jake felt his hands make fists under the table. The trade routes they proposed would cut travel time between human colonies by weeks. Human engineers had spent months studying the space lanes and checking for dangers, but the council always found ways to say no to human ideas. The Vrex representative spoke next. The Vrex looked like giant insects with shiny black skin and many eyes. "Humans are too emotional to make good decisions about trade," the Vrex said. "They get angry when pirates attack their cargo ships instead of finding logical solutions." Lisa leaned over to Jake and whispered, "Logical solutions like what? Letting the pirates take everything?" The pirate attacks had been getting worse for months. Human cargo ships carried food and medicine to colonies that needed them. When pirates attacked these ships, people went hungry or got sick. Jake had asked the council for help many times, but they always said it was not their problem. The pirates only seemed to attack human ships, which made Jake think someone was telling them which ships to hit. A Korthan delegate stood up to speak. The Korthans were the oldest species in the council and looked like walking trees with bark for skin and glowing green spots for eyes. "Humans have only been in space for a few decades," the ancient being said in a voice like wind through leaves. "Other species have traveled between stars for thousands of years. Humans must learn patience and respect for those who came before." Jake had heard this speech so many times he could say it from memory. The council loved to remind humans that they were new to space travel. But humans had invented faster engines than most council species used. Human doctors had cured diseases that killed aliens for centuries. Human farmers grew food that could feed entire worlds. None of that seemed to matter when the council made decisions. The worst part came when they voted on the mining rights for 3 star systems. These were systems that human explorers had found and mapped. Human scientists had spent years studying the planets and moons to see what resources were there. Human survey teams had risked their lives flying through dangerous asteroid fields to get the information. But the council voted to give exclusive mining rights to the Vrex Mining Consortium. "The Vrex have more experience with large mining operations," the council chairman said. His name was Zelix, and he was also a Zalari. "Humans can serve as workers for the Vrex if they want to be involved in these projects." Jake stood up so fast his chair fell backward. The sound echoed through the huge chamber, and every alien eye turned to look at him. Lisa grabbed his arm, but he pulled away from her. 30 years of this treatment was enough. 30 years of being told humans were too young or too stupid or too emotional to make their own decisions. 30 years of watching other species take credit for human discoveries and inventions. "The United Earth Federation formally withdraws from this council effective immediately," Jake said. His voice carried clearly through the chamber without needing the translation devices. Every alien in the room could understand English even if they pretended they could not. The chamber went completely silent. Even the soft humming of the air. Systems seemed to stop. Chairman Zelix made a choking sound, and his yellow eyes went wide. "We tried diplomacy," Jake continued. "We tried cooperation. We tried being good partners and following your rules. But you do not want partners. You want servants. You want humans to do the hard work and dangerous jobs while you take the profits and make all the decisions." Lisa stood up next to Jake. She was smiling for the first time in months. "We are done being treated like children," Jake said. "We are done begging for permission to trade with our own colonies. We are done watching you give away our discoveries to your friends. Humanity is leaving this council and we will not be coming back." The silence stretched on for long seconds before chaos erupted throughout the chamber. Chairman Zelix tried to restore order in the council chamber, but panic had already taken hold. Alien delegates jumped from their seats and started shouting in dozens of different languages. The translation systems could not keep up with all the noise and started making strange beeping sounds. Some of the smaller species ran for the exits, while others demanded to know what humans meant by leaving the council. Jake Morrison walked toward the main door with Lisa Carter right behind him. Other alien delegates tried to block their path, but Jake pushed through them without stopping. A Vrex representative grabbed Jake's arm with one of its sharp claws, but Lisa pulled out a small device that made a loud buzzing sound. The Vrex let go immediately and stepped back. "You cannot simply leave," Zelix called after them. "There are procedures and forms and waiting periods. You must follow proper diplomatic channels." Jake turned around one last time before reaching the door. "We followed your procedures for 30 years, he said. "We filled out your forms and waited through your delays and watched you ignore every reasonable request we made. Those days are over." The heavy doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Lisa was breathing hard, but she looked happier than she had in years. They walked quickly through the long hallways of Station Unity toward the human diplomatic quarters. Other aliens they passed stared at them with confusion and fear. Within an hour, the news had spread throughout the galaxy. Captain Ryan Brooks received an emergency message while his cargo ship was docked at Vrex Station 7. The message came directly from Earth Command and had only 5 words. "Withdraw all vessels immediately home." Ryan had been expecting something like this for months. The Council kept making new rules that made it harder for human ships to operate in their space. They charged humans extra fees for docking and fuel. They made human captains wait days for permission to land on planets that other species could visit freely. Ryan was actually glad to get the withdrawal order. Dr. Amanda Price was working in the medical center on Zalari Prime when her communicator started flashing red. The emergency message told her to pack up all human medical equipment and return to Earth space within 72 hours. Amanda looked around the hospital ward where she had been treating patients from a dozen different species. Most of the medical devices keeping these patients alive were built by human companies using human technology. Amanda started making a list of everything that would need to be replaced. The quantum healing chambers were human inventions that worked better than anything the aliens had developed. The bioscanners that could detect diseases in any known species had been designed by human doctors. Even the computer systems that managed patient records ran on human software. The Vrex Commerce Minister named Krax was having his own crisis in his office overlooking the busy spaceport. Reports were coming in from all over Vrex space about human ships requesting immediate departure clearance. Krax pulled up the shipping manifests and felt his 4 stomachs sink. Human transport companies handled almost half of all cargo movement between Vrex worlds. Human passenger ships carried thousands of Vrex citizens between planets every day. Worse than that were the technical reports Krax had never paid much attention to before. The quantum drive engines that powered most civilian ships in Council space were manufactured by human companies. The navigation computers that calculated safe routes through hyperspace were built with human technology. Even the artificial gravity systems that kept aliens comfortable during long space flights had been improved by human engineers. President Helen Rodriguez stood in the Oval Office on Earth preparing to address the world. Her advisors had been working all night to coordinate the largest evacuation in human history. Every human citizen living in council space needed to be brought home safely. Every human ship and piece of equipment had to be removed before the aliens could seize them. "Madam President," her chief of staff said, "we have confirmed that all human personnel have received evacuation orders. Admiral Stone estimates the operation will take 6 weeks to complete." Helen nodded and walked to the cameras that would broadcast her speech across human space. She thought about all the times human diplomats had been insulted and dismissed by the council. She remembered the reports of human colonies being attacked while the council did nothing to help. She thought about young human engineers whose inventions had been stolen by alien corporations with council approval. "My fellow humans," Helen began, "today marks the end of an era and the beginning of a new chapter in human history. For 3 decades we have tried to work within the Galactic Council system. We offered friendship and received suspicion. We offered innovation and received regulation. We offered cooperation and received condescension." The president paused and looked directly into the camera. "Today we choose a different path. Today we choose independence. We will no longer beg for permission to trade with our own colonies. We will no longer accept being treated as second-class citizens in our own galaxy. We will forge our own destiny among the stars." Back on Station Unity, Chairman Zelix was meeting with the other council leaders in an emergency session. The Corthan elder looked particularly troubled as he reviewed economic reports on his datapad. "Perhaps we should send a diplomatic mission to Earth," suggested the Turgan delegate. "Surely we can negotiate some arrangement that benefits everyone." Zelix made a dismissive gesture with his upper arms. "Humans are being childish," he said. "When they realize how much they need council protection and access to our markets, they will come crawling back. We simply need to wait for them to come to their senses." The Corthan elder did not look convinced. His ancient eyes had seen many species rise and fall over the centuries. "In my experience," he said slowly, "the species that survive are not always the ones with the most pride. None of them understood yet just how much their comfortable lives depended on human work and human innovation. They would learn soon enough." Admiral Kevin Stone stood on the bridge of the battleship Liberty and watched the largest evacuation in human history unfold on the screens around him. Thousands of human ships were moving through space in carefully planned patterns. Cargo vessels, loaded with equipment and personal belongings. Passenger ships carrying families back to human space. Military escorts making sure everyone got home safely. The operation was bigger than any war fleet humanity had ever assembled. Kevin had spent weeks planning every detail with his staff. They had to move 2 million human citizens from hundreds of different worlds and space stations. Every human-built piece of equipment had to be packed up and taken home. Even the garbage from human facilities was being loaded onto ships. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we have confirmation from Sector 7. The last human families have lifted off from Vrex Colony Delta." Kevin nodded and marked another location as complete on his tactical display. The Vrex had been demanding that humans leave behind the orbital factories they had built around several Vrex worlds. Kevin had politely explained that every bolt and wire in those factories belonged to human companies. If the Vrex wanted manufacturing facilities, they could build their own. Captain Sophie Turner was leading a convoy of cargo ships away from Zalari space when her sensors detected something interesting. A group of alien merchant vessels was following, her ships at a safe distance. These were not council species but independent traders who operated in the border regions between different alien territories. Sophie opened a communication channel to the lead alien ship. "This is Captain Turner of the Earth merchant vessel Golden Eagle. Can we help you with something?" The reply came in broken English from a species Sophie did not recognize. "We hear humans leaving council space. We want to know if humans still trade with non-council species." Sophie smiled and looked at her cargo manifest. Her ships were carrying rare minerals and manufactured goods that could be traded anywhere in the galaxy. "We are always interested in fair trading partnerships," she said. "Follow us to the Kepler system and we can discuss business." The alien traders sent back a sound that their translators turned into laughter. "Council species never treat small traders fairly. Maybe humans are different." Danny Walsh was the last human technician to leave Station Unity. He had been working for 3 days straight to shut down the communication arrays that connected Council space to the rest of the galaxy. The systems were incredibly complex because they combined technology from dozens of different species. Human engineers had spent years figuring out how to make all the different components work together. Danny finished disconnecting the last human-built relay and packed it into a shipping container. Without these relays, the Council's faster-than-light communication network would start failing within days. Messages that used to arrive instantly would take weeks to travel between distant systems. "Wait," called a Vrex technician who had been watching Danny work. "You cannot take that equipment. The Council paid for those installations." Danny pulled out his work orders and showed them to the Vrex. "The Council paid for installation services," he said. "The equipment itself was manufactured by Stellar Communications, Inc., which is a human company. We are taking our property home." The Vrex made angry clicking sounds but could not argue with the legal documents. Every human-built component had been properly registered and insured. The Council had never bothered to actually purchase the technology they used every day. On the planet New Harmony, human colonists were loading the last of their equipment onto transport ships. This world had been jointly settled by humans and Turgans 5 years ago. The Turgans watched sadly as their human neighbors prepared to leave. A Turgan farmer named Zilks approached Colonel Janet Hayes, who was supervising the evacuation. "Why must you go?" Zilks asked through his translator. "We have worked well together. Our crops grow better when we share knowledge." Janet felt sorry for Zilix and the other Turgans who had been good neighbors. "We have no quarrel with your people," she said, "but we cannot stay in Council space while they treat us like servants. You are welcome to visit us in human territory any time." Zilix looked thoughtful. "Perhaps some Turgans will choose to leave Council space as well. The Council taxes our harvests heavily and gives us little in return." Meanwhile, in Council chambers, across the galaxy, emergency meetings were being held. The Corthans were the first to realize how serious the situation had become. Their ancient civilization had detailed records of galactic history, and they knew what happened when crucial infrastructure collapsed. The humans maintained 40% of all interstellar communication relays, the Corthan science minister reported to his government. They operated 30% of cargo transport between member worlds. Their medical technology treats diseases that our doctors cannot cure. The Corthan Prime Minister was old even by Corthan standards. He had lived for over 800 years and had seen many changes in galactic politics. "How long before the communication networks fail completely?" he asked. 2 weeks, came the reply. "Maybe 3 if we are lucky." The Vrex were having their own crisis meetings. Reports were coming in from mining operations throughout their territory. Most of their excavation equipment used quantum drilling systems invented by human engineers, without human technicians. To maintain these systems, the drilling would have to stop. Even worse were the reports from their transport division. The quantum drive engines that powered their cargo fleet were starting to malfunction. Human maintenance crews had been keeping these engines running with regular tune-ups and replacement parts. Now those crews were gone, and the replacement parts were no longer available. The Zalari Empire was facing the biggest crisis of all. Their economy was built on luxury trade and financial services. Wealthy aliens from all over the galaxy came to Zalari worlds to buy expensive goods and invest their money in Zalari banks. But most of the transport ships that brought these customers were human-operated vessels. Within a week of the human exodus, the number of visitors to Zalari space had dropped by 60%. The remaining alien ships were old and slow because they did not have quantum drive engines. A journey that used to take days now took weeks. Chairman Zelix called for another emergency session of the council. "This is obviously a temporary disruption," he announced to the assembled delegates. "Once humans realize they cannot survive without access to council markets and protection, they will return and accept more reasonable terms for membership." But in the back of the chamber, the Corthan elder was shaking his head slowly. He had read the historical records. He knew what happened to civilizations that became too dependent on others for their basic needs. The council was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the value of cooperation versus dominance. 6 months after humanity left the Galactic Council, the old order was collapsing faster than anyone had imagined possible. Admiral Nathan Cruz stood on the bridge of the human battleship Independence and watched his fleet patrol the outer rim territories. What had started as a defensive mission to protect human colonies had grown into something much larger. Every week brought new requests for protection from species that had never spoken to humans before. Independent traders, small colonies, and even some former council worlds were asking for help against the pirates and raiders that now roamed freely through undefended space. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we have another distress signal from the Targan mining colony in Sector 12. They report 3 raider ships approaching their system." Nathan looked at his tactical display. The Targans were not a council species, but they had always been peaceful miners who kept to themselves. The raiders knew that mining colonies had valuable metals and equipment, but no military protection. "Dispatch Strike Group 7, Nathan ordered. "Tell the raiders they have 10 minutes to leave Targan space before we arrive." The human fleet had become the most effective security force in this part of the galaxy. Human ships were faster than anything the raiders had, and human crews were better trained for combat. Word was spreading that attacking anyone under human protection was a very bad idea. Captain Jennifer Walsh was leading a diplomatic mission to the former council world of Brenton Prime. The planet had been abandoned by the council after their orbital shipyard shut down when human technicians left. Now the Brenton government was secretly requesting to join the growing human federation. "Captain Walsh," the Brenton Prime Minister said through his translator, "our people have watched how humans treat their allies. You offer true partnership instead of demanding tribute and obedience like the council did." Jennifer reviewed the intelligence reports about Brenton Prime. The planet had valuable industrial facilities and a skilled workforce. But more importantly, the Brentons had been oppressed by council bureaucracy for decades. Their own citizens had been prevented from developing advanced technology because it might compete with council corporations. "The Human Federation welcomes any species that believes in equality and mutual cooperation," Jennifer replied. "But we want to be sure you understand what you are choosing. The Council will not be happy about losing another member world." The Chao, Brenton Prime Minister, made a gesture that Jennifer's cultural briefing told her was equivalent to laughing. "The Council has not responded to our messages in 3 months. They are too busy with their own problems to care about distant worlds like ours." This was happening all across former council space. The central government was losing control of outer territories because they could not communicate effectively or provide basic services. Worlds that had been loyal council members for centuries were declaring independence or requesting to join the Human Federation. President Helen Rodriguez received daily reports about the changing galactic situation from her office on Earth. The numbers were staggering. 47 non-council species had formally requested alliance with humanity. 12 former council worlds had declared independence and were seeking human protection. Even some council species were sending secret diplomatic missions to explore better relationships with humans. "Madam President," her intelligence director said, "we have confirmed reports that the Zalari Empire is fragmenting. 3 outer provinces have declared independence, and 2 more are considering it. Their central government cannot maintain control without functional transportation and communication networks." Helen studied the galactic map on her wall display. Red markers showed former council territories that were now independent or aligned with humanity. The areas still under council control were shrinking every month. The Vrex Mining Consortium was facing complete bankruptcy. Their mining operations had been shut down for months because they could not repair their quantum drilling equipment. Worse yet, their cargo ships were breaking down and stranding valuable minerals in warehouses across Vrex space. We must swallow our pride and negotiate with the humans, the Vrex Trade Minister told an emergency meeting of corporate leaders. Our stockholders are demanding immediate action to save their investments. But negotiating with humans was complicated because the Virex government was still officially part of the council. Any direct contact with humanity would be seen as betrayal by the remaining council leadership. The Corthans were having their own internal debates about the future. As the oldest species in the council, they had the most historical perspective about galactic politics. Many Corthan scholars were studying human behavior and reaching disturbing conclusions about their own civilization. The humans have demonstrated something we forgot long ago, announced Elder Thorak to the Corthan ruling assembly. They value innovation over tradition and cooperation over domination. While we have been resting on ancient achievements, they have been building the future. Young Corthans especially were fascinated by human technology and social organization. Human colonies operated with remarkable efficiency and fairness compared to the rigid hierarchies of Corthan society. Some Corthan students were even requesting permission to study in human universities. The most dramatic change was happening in the border regions where humans had established their new trade networks. Independent merchants from dozens of species were flocking to human-operated stations and markets. These traders had been shut out of council commerce for years because they could not afford the high fees and lengthy permit processes. Captain Sophie Turner was managing one of the busiest trading stations in independent space. Her facility handled more cargo in a month than some council worlds processed in a year. The difference was that humans treated all customers fairly regardless of their species or political status. The profit margins are incredible, Sophie reported, to Earth Trade Authority. These independent species are eager to trade because they finally have access to fair markets. Many of them have been developing advanced technologies that the Council never allowed them to sell. The Council leaders were finally receiving reports that made them understand the scope of their disaster. The Galactic Council now controlled less than 60% of the territory it had governed before humans left. Economic activity in council space had dropped by half while trade in human-controlled areas was booming. Chairman Zelix called for another emergency session, but fewer delegates attended each meeting. Several council species had not sent representatives in months because they were too busy dealing with their own internal problems. "We must find a way to bring the humans back," said the Turgan delegate, who was one of the few species still trying to maintain council unity. "Without them, our entire civilization will collapse." The Corthan elder who attended these meetings looked very tired. "Perhaps our civilization deserves to collapse," he said quietly. "We built an empire on the work of others and convinced ourselves we were superior. The humans have shown us what we really are. In deep space, human exploration fleets were discovering new worlds and making contact with species that had never been part of any galactic government. These first contact missions were establishing the foundation for a completely different kind of interstellar community based on voluntary cooperation instead of forced membership. The galaxy was reorganizing itself around human principles, and there was no going back to the old system. The Galactic Council had become an empty shell while the Human Federation grew stronger every day. 1 year after humanity withdrew from the Galactic Council, the old system existed only in name. The council chamber on Station Unity was mostly empty during meetings because half the member species had either left or stopped sending delegates. Those who remained spent their time arguing about who was responsible for the collapse instead of finding solutions. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood in the main assembly hall of New Geneva Station and looked out at representatives from 47 different species. This was the first official meeting of the Free Systems Alliance, and the atmosphere was completely different from the old council meetings. Instead of the formal hierarchy and ancient protocols that had dominated galactic politics for centuries, this gathering felt like a conversation between equals. "Welcome to all species who have chosen cooperation over domination," Jake said to begin the meeting. "The Free Systems Alliance is built on simple principles. Every member has an equal voice regardless of how long they have traveled in space. Decisions are made based on merit and mutual benefit rather than tradition and political power." The Brenton representative stood up to speak first. Her people had been the first former council world to officially join the alliance. "For 300 years, my species served the council faithfully," she said. "We paid taxes and followed regulations and received little in return. In 6 months of alliance with humanity, our trade has increased 500% and our technology has advanced more than it did in the previous 50 years. Similar stories came from representatives around the room. The Targan miners had new equipment that doubled their production while making their work safer. The Corvian agricultural worlds were using human farming techniques to grow food that fed hungry populations across independent space. Even species that had never been contacted by the Council were benefiting from human medical advances and communication technology. President Helen Rodriguez watched the Alliance meeting from Earth and felt satisfied with how humanity had handled its independence. The decision to leave the Council had been difficult but necessary. Now humans were leading a new kind of galactic community that actually worked for everyone involved. "The latest economic reports are remarkable," her trade minister reported. "Human space now handles more interstellar commerce than the Council did at its peak. Our manufacturing output has increased by 200%, and unemployment is at historic lows." The key to human success had been treating alien species as genuine partners instead of subordinates. Human companies shared technology freely with alliance members. Human universities accepted students from any species that wanted to learn. Human hospitals treated patients regardless of their ability to pay or their species' political status. Admiral Nathan Cruz was expanding the Alliance patrol network to protect more independent worlds from raiders and pirates. The human fleet had grown larger than ever before as more species contributed ships and resources to the common defense. Unlike the Council's rigid military hierarchy, the Alliance fleet operated with remarkable flexibility and efficiency. "Admiral," his intelligence officer reported, "we have intercepted communications from the Zalari remnant territories. They are requesting permission to send a diplomatic mission to discuss terms for joining the Alliance." Nathan was not surprised by this news. The Zalari Empire had completely fallen apart over the past year. Their economy had collapsed when their transportation networks failed. Their outer provinces had declared independence when the central government could no longer provide basic services. Now, even the core Zalari worlds were struggling to survive. "Tell them they can send representatives," Nathan replied. "But make it clear that former Council species receive no special treatment. They will be evaluated by the same standards as everyone else." The irony was not lost on any human leader. The same alien species that had treated humanity as junior partners were now begging to be accepted into the human-led alliance. Some humans wanted to reject these requests as revenge for years of condescension and discrimination. But most human leaders understood that building a better galactic community meant rising above the mistakes of the past. Captain Sophie Turner was managing the largest trading station in Alliance space when she received an unexpected visitor. A Vrex corporate delegation had arrived with a proposal for economic cooperation. The Vrex Mining Consortium was offering to share their remaining mining rights in exchange for access to human quantum drilling technology. "We understand that we made mistakes in our previous relationship with humanity," the lead Vrex representative said. "We treated your people unfairly, and we apologize. We hope you will give us a chance to prove we can be better partners." Sophie reviewed the proposal carefully. The Vrex had valuable mining operations, but their equipment was obsolete and failing. Human companies could modernize these operations and increase production while providing good jobs for Vrex workers. But the deal would only work if the Vrex were genuinely committed to fair treatment of human personnel. "We are willing to consider partnership," Sophie replied, "but understand that Alliance members operate under strict labor and safety standards. There will be no special privileges for Vrex managers and no discrimination against human workers." The Vrex delegation agreed immediately. They had learned the hard way that human cooperation was worth more than Vrex pride. Dr. Susan Blake had established the most advanced medical research facility in known space on the human world of New Eden. Her laboratories were developing treatments for diseases that affected dozens of different species. The difference was that this research was shared freely with Alliance members instead of being restricted by corporate patents and political barriers. "We have successfully developed a cure for the Vrex plague that has been killing thousands," Susan announced to the Alliance Medical Council. "We are ready to begin production and distribution immediately." The Vrex government had been requesting this cure for months, but could not afford the prices that Council pharmaceutical companies were demanding. The Alliance Medical Program provided essential medicines at cost to any species that needed them. Jake Morrison was reviewing applications for Alliance membership when he came across a familiar name. The Corthan Republic was requesting to join, as an independent member separate from the old Council structure. The application included a remarkable statement from Elder Thorak acknowledging that Corthan civilization had become stagnant and needed to learn from younger species. "We have lived for thousands of years, but we have not grown," the Corthan application stated. "Humans have shown us that age without wisdom is meaningless. We request the opportunity to contribute our knowledge while learning new ways of thinking." This was exactly the kind of transformation that the Alliance was designed to encourage. Species that were willing to change and adapt could find new purpose and prosperity as Alliance members. The final collapse of the Galactic Council came quietly. Chairman Zelix announced that the remaining member species could no longer afford to maintain station unity or the Council bureaucracy. The station would be sold to pay debts, and the Council would be officially dissolved. "Perhaps this is for the best," Zelix said in his final speech to the empty chamber. "We tried to preserve an old system that had outlived its usefulness. The galaxy has moved beyond us." Meanwhile, on New Geneva Station, the Alliance was approving plans for expansion into previously unexplored regions of space. Human survey teams were making contact with new species every month and offering them the choice to join a community based on equality and mutual respect. The Alliance had grown to include 73 different species in just 1 year. Trade was booming. Scientific research was advancing rapidly, and conflicts between member species were resolved through negotiation instead of military force. Admiral Nathan Cruz stood in the Alliance Command Center and watched peaceful ships from dozens of species traveling safely through space that had once been plagued by pirates and raiders. The galaxy was becoming a better place because humans had chosen to walk away from a broken system and build something new. The old Galactic Council had ruled through fear and tradition. The Free Systems Alliance governed through cooperation and innovation. The difference was as clear as the stars themselves.